everyone, I hope you're all getting excited to get started on the Glenbarrow knit along. I know it feels like a really long time for when it went on pre-sale to when the first clue came out, so I think the anticipation is fairly high at this point. Now, most of you have been doing really well with the swatching, and you've swatched the stockinette stitch and you swatched the double moss stitch. So hopefully that means that you've reached the point now where you know your gauge, and if it's a little off, you know what adjustments you need to make. And you've picked the size you want to make, and if you're between sizes, you may be starting to figure out the kind of changes you'll need to make so that this is going to work for you. Now, in this video today, I want to introduce the first clue and explain all of the different steps and the things that you can change or think about changing as you're going through it. So it's top down, which means that we're going to begin with the yoke. So the first clue is going to end here at the bottom of the yoke. So I'm going to talk a little bit through about how I put the yoke together. So that means that you'll also get an idea of if you're going to change it, where you'd make those changes. So you begin first of all, and you cast on all your stitches around the neck here. And the center of the round is right here in the middle of the front. Reason for that is it just ended up being much easier when you're working short rows back and forth, because it means that you can go back and forth and you can add all of the raglan increases you want in, and it's not going to interfere with the short rows. So it just makes it a lot more straightforward. You can see as well that the edge of it is designed to be kind of a fairly kind of a rough curled edge. So you've got, after the cast on, you've got a few rounds where it's just knit all the way around, and that's designed to allow it to curl and roll like this. And then at that point we start doing short rows, and they kind of come across to here. I think they begin here and they start working down here. So they are all worked in stockinette stitch, and you can see across here that the stockinette for the first little bit, but on the back what that means is there's a slightly bigger stretch where there's going to be stockinette stitch, and I left it that way because otherwise you're going to be trying to combine short rows and double moss stitch at the front, which is quite complex. If you do want to change the neck and you want to put a different edging on, what will happen is this will get pulled up and that stockinette stitch is going to be a bit more exposed. So if you know you want to do that, I would actually suggest beginning the double moss stitch panels a little bit higher up on the back, so that when this gets pulled up, the double moss stitch is going to be completed from down here. You don't need to worry about it really on the front, because there's only a small little bit here, because obviously the short rows are working across here and most of the extra length for the short rows are across the back. If you are going to leave the neck the way it is, there's no reason to have to make any changes along here. It's just, I know that's something that a few people were interested in changing. And if you're going to change the neck and put an edging, whether it's, like my preference if you're going to put an edging on would probably be an I-cord edging. I think it would look really nice. But if you are going to do that, omit those 3 straight rows at the rounds of knit at the beginning, because there's no reason to have them if you're not trying to create a curved top there. So that's your setup and your German short rows, and then you start working from that point down, and you've got double moss stitch panels here, and on each side of it you've got what I call my slip stitch columns, and they're done by, on one round you'll slip the stitch and on the next round you'll knit it. So you need to keep a close eye on those, that you don't accidentally end up kind of getting kicked out of pattern, so to speak. And then all of your increases happen outside those. So if you've done raglan increases before, you'd have been used to you'd have a raglan seam line with your increases at each side of it. This separates it out a little bit and inserts that double moss stitch panel in between the raglan increases, and it creates a really interesting shape because your increases are suddenly here and here rather than down one single line. So it creates a very different, and I really like it, the shape that it makes. And also because you're working the increases next to the slip stitch column, they're extra invisible, because the slip stitch column is what dominates and the line you make. And so it's much easier to adjust all of those increases and the rate of increase when you've got that, because you're not going to see it and you're not going to have a difference visually in how it looks. So when you're coming down, you start off with all of your raglan increases, and then the different sizes work through different rates of increases. Some of them will then go on to having the raglan every fourth round. Other ones may have a raglan increase alternated with the body increase. And the reason those are all adjusted is so that every part of the sweater is going to fit the way you want it to fit. So the neck is the right size, the yoke is the correct depth, and the number of stitches you have for the body and the number of stitches you have for the sleeve for your body size are correct. And in the workshop, I explain the thinking through each of those, and also show a little chart on how each of those all fit together. So it should make it a little easier for you if you wanted to make a few little changes as to where would you add or remove some increases for the body if you needed it, or for the sleeves, and what kind of impact is that going to have further down the body. But it's a fairly straightforward sweater, so it makes it a very good one, I think, for modifying it to make it your own and making little tweaks as you go along, because it's very clear as to, if you make a change, how that's going to have a knock-on impact as you go through. So have fun knitting it, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks' time for a clue.